Alright, welcome everybody to part 5 of Mix versus Mix, where me and my buddy Sam are both doing a mix of the same song, and we're going to kind of compare and contrast our different methods and techniques to get the sound that was inside our head when we listened to this mix. And we're not only just showing tips, but we're also talking about why we choose to do things. And that's one of the most important things when it comes to mixing. So in part 5, we're going to go ahead and look at guitars. And this might be somewhat of a longer episode, just to be warned, because there is a lot of guitar tracks. All these green tracks are guitar tracks. And as you can see, there's quite a bit here. So I'll try and be as thorough as possible without taking up a whole lot of time. So that being said, let's go ahead and listen to this. We'll listen to the guitars in and out of the track, and then I'll do some bypassing of the processing, and we'll go into the individual tracks and kind of look at the plugins I used, talk about why I used them, and do a little bit of talking about the processing there. So let's go ahead and get started with some audio examples. Okay, so let's take a look at some of this processing. As you could hear, when I bypassed the plugins on the guitar bus, it was a huge difference. These guitars sound good on their own, but it's definitely too much low end, and it's fighting with the bass guitar in the track. I mean, in solo they sound great, but in the track, there was definitely some EQ work that needed to be done, and when there's a lot of tracks, they kind of sometimes sound too separated, so I needed to glue them together with just a little bit of compression. And for the most part, the compression is being done with the LA3A here, but barely. I mean, most of the time you could see when I pulled it up, there was not even any gain reduction happening. It's only catching like the real peaks. So let's go ahead and take a look. So as with everything, I'm using the virtual tape machine. I drove it a little bit harder just to get some more of that tape saturation, because I'm using 15 inches per second, and I really wanted to tame some of that fizziness on the electric guitars. That's something that you run into a lot with electric guitars, and tape machines or tape emulations are a great way to kind of tame that. And I'm using the half-inch 2-track here because I'm just using this one instance for all of the guitar tracks. So coming into the virtual mix rack, I'm just using some Neve emulation, kind of fill up those low mids without sounding muddy. And to To get some clarity, I'm rolling off about 80 hertz with a high pass filter, adding some 4K for some clarity, and then some 10K also to give it just a little bit of like shimmer on top. And to give it a little bit of grit and color, I actually use this FG73, which is a 1073 preamp emulation. And these preamps are becoming some of my favorite plugins. I'm finding now that with a lot of things, if I feel like I need to EQ it, I'll just throw one of these preamps on there and kind of get it in the sweet spot, and that'll kind of take care of things. And then from there, I went into the FG Bomber, and I just used a preset called Guitar Aggressive, and that really does exactly what the name says. Just kind of makes the guitars bite, and it's just really nice sounding. And then my favorite compressor on guitars is an LA3A, and I'm using the Waves one. And like I said, I'm just catching the peaks with that, and tried to level match it as best as possible. Okay, coming over to the individual tracks, you can see mostly everything is just virtual mix rack. So I'll just show you what I did for the acoustic guitars, because even though there's 3 different acoustic guitars, they're all processed the same way. Rolled off quite a bit of the low end here, so about 130 hertz, but also added some fatness in here at 200. So sometimes when you do a roll off and a boost in kind of similar areas, you'll get this really sweet sound. Try that with your EQs. You could do that with a low pass filter too, kind of roll off some of the super high end and then do a high shelf below that. It really sounds nice and gives it kind of a focused sound. So added some of that fatness, rolled off some of the muddiness here at 400. You'll see that I do that a lot. I added some of this bigness in here, quite a bit actually, and then just added some of this silky from the Custom Series Lift. This Custom Series Lift is also a great plugin, and a lot of times I'll just use that instead of any EQ, and it'll really do the trick. So usually I don't like to compress acoustic guitars, but I found that this Blue 1176 here works really good on acoustic guitar. I saw that in one of Steven Slate's videos, and for me it just really works. So to make sure that the low end of the acoustic isn't really over triggering this, I have the high pass filter sidechain in, and to retain some of the original dynamics, I have it dialed back with the mix knob here about 45%. And just getting some light compression there. So that's the same for all the acoustics. As far as the ambient guitars, just cutting out some of the low mids and filtering out a lot of the low end. I'm using just a little bit of compression, maybe 3 dB of compression, and then making it up just to make it a little more even, because it wasn't very consistent in the dynamics. Ratio of 2:1, medium attack, medium release, because I want this to I don't want a slow attack because I don't want this to be forward, but I also don't want this to be, I also don't want this to be like sitting way back in the mix. So I kind of wanted it in the depth, in terms of depth, I wanted it kind of somewhere sitting in the middle, if that makes sense. And then just also added some of this silky high lift in here. Sounds really nice. And on all of these ambient guitars, they were processed the same way with the virtual mix rack, but I also used Sound Toys Little Micro Shift just to give it a little bit more of that chorusing sound. And I think that I did the same processing on all of those. And it just really gives it some width, but in a nice way. It doesn't make it like overly wide where it sounds weird coming out of your speakers. And then when we get to the electric guitars, I'm processing this in kind of a different way, because you could see here that it says right guitar 421, right guitar VR88. So what that's telling me is that there was 2 mics on one source. So really, there's like three guitars. There's a right guitar, a left guitar, and then a lead guitar, but they all have two mics on them. So you can see I have them panned left for one that I want to be on the right, left, excuse me, and then right. Okay, so rhythm guitar 1, rhythm guitar 2. So both of the one guitars are on the left, and then both of the two guitars are on the right. So what I did was the left guitars are both processed the same. So I have an SSL EQ here, rolling off about 80 hertz. Then I'm cutting out some of 400 like I've been doing. Got rid of a little bit of the fizziness there at 3K, then added some of the shimmer. And also to get rid of some of that digital bite, I also added some of the virtual drive. Okay, so both these rhythm guitar 1s are both processed that way. So as far as rhythm guitar 2, I did a similar thing, but I rolled off some of the top end to give it a little bit of variance in the sound. And other than that, it's pretty much the same thing because they do sound quite a bit different. And then as far as the lead guitar, I have some virtual drive, FGN kind of being processed like how I would process a lead vocal. So I have a high shelf here at 12K, some 7.2 to make it cut through, rolling off of some of this 360, adding some body here at 220, and then rolling off all the way up to 160 because I don't need that low end for the lead guitar. Then adding some shimmer and thickness just to make it sound a little bit sweeter. And then also on the lead guitar, I have my favorite guitar delay, which is a tube delay, and that's the STA delay. I actually got this for free when they were having a promotion on it, and it's just really sweet. I use the filter on it, so I roll off a lot of the low end and a lot of the high end, and then quite a bit of intensity here, and I have it as a ping pong delay. So we actually didn't get to listen to the lead guitar, so let's listen to a little bit of that. I'm not going to do any bypassing of the plugins. I just want you to hear the tone of it, and then we'll have some final words, and we'll call it a day from there. So I ended it a little bit early there just so that way you could hear the ping pong of the guitar delay there. And that really just gives it a sense of space that I really, really like. And I have that panned right up the center. So yeah, I really hope that you liked these guitars. To me, that was actually kind of a tricky part of mixing this song, was getting these guitars, especially the electric guitars, to sit right in this mix. Pretty much everything else was fairly easy to me. Besides the strings, but that'll be next time that we talk about that. But these guitars really kind of were a problem for me. They were a little bit fizzy, a little bit too muddy for me. Great sound, great amp, great player, but just in the context of a mix that has, you know, like 45 channels, plus a couple samples that I added in, it just was too much. So really EQ and a little bit of compression it goes a long way, and it can really transform your mix. I think I've said it before, but I'll say it again. EQ and compression are your two main tools when it comes to mixing, and really, if you get a handle on that, you can really make some good sounding mixes. And one last tip that I'll leave you with that I'll actually make a video on in the future. One of the things that I've come to learn now, that I didn't know so much when I was starting out, is that you really, when it comes to EQ, you really got to just mostly focus on the mid range. Making room in the mid range is what separates the men from the boys and the girls from the women. It really, really is all about the mid range. Myself, along with a lot of beginner mixers, I think that when you first start out, you start out worrying too much about just the low end and the high end, which are definitely very, very important. But the most important part is getting that mid range down. If you get a solid low end, great. If you have a sweet sounding top end, great. But if you mess up the mid range, your entire mix is going to be clouded and just not sound very good. So I know that was a little bit of a tangent, but don't make the mistake that I made when I first started out and when I was completely amateur. Since I've started focusing more on the mid-range, low mids, and upper mids, my mixes have sounded a lot better, and I think that this mix is starting to sound pretty good. So let me know what you think. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned something new. If you want me to go more in detail on this, or like go back into the acoustic guitars and kind of A/B some of these things, I can do that for you on a separate video. It's just for the sake of time, I can't really do that for everything just because there's so many tracks, and it would take a really long time. And this video has already been pretty long, so I hope you enjoyed this video. Please give it a thumbs up if you liked it. If you didn't, you can go ahead and give it a thumbs down. That's okay. You're entitled to your opinion, as I always say. If you really liked this, please subscribe. I would greatly, greatly appreciate that. Thank you so very much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video. Have a wonderful day.